Here with Gladys Mwiti, Dr. Gladys Mwiti from Nairobi, Kenya, who's the founder and executive director of Oasis Africa Counseling Ministry. She earned her doctorate at Fuller Theological Seminary in clinical psychology. ScholarLeaders had the privilege of supporting Gladys during her studies, and since then has been in touch with her as she has developed what has truly been the first Christian counseling ministry and training program in Kenya, and has been a part of not only developing the Christian ministry of counseling, but truly developing clinical psychology in Africa, in Kenya and in Africa. And one of the things that has happened throughout your career is you have been called in to help with trauma healing in a variety of places. Even before she earned her PhD, Gladys was a part of the trauma work after the Rwandan genocide, the U.S. Embassy bombing in 1998. Since then, some of the tragedies in the nation of Kenya, the post-election violence, more recently the Westgate bombings, and even within the last month, the Al-Shabaab terrorist attack in Garissa. And I think as we hear that and realize that there are these horrific things happening, and very often you are one of the leaders going in not only to provide counseling and healing, but also to train others and to help them bring a sense of reconciliation, a sense of healing to these just awful moments where we see truly evil manifest itself and damage the lives of people. Now, why do you do that? What is it that has given you a passion for bringing healing into the lives of people, particularly in the midst of such trauma?
Even the centrality of what I do is summarized actually in Isaiah 61. And these are the words that our Lord cited. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because He's called me to bring freedom, to the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord, to open the eyes of the blind. And then it says, the Lord says that after Him He is called, and after these blind people begin to see, after the broken are healed, after the prisoners are set free, He calls them a new name. He calls them oaks of righteousness, for the binding and the building and the healing of my people. Then they too begin to open the eyes of the blind. They begin to set the prisoners free. So my calling in particular is not that I, as Gladys Mwiti, am the healer. The Lord is a healer. I keep saying, actually, and I said it at Fuller countless times, that to me, psychology is a thermometer. The healer is the Lord Jesus Christ. So through me, then He brings up hopes of righteousness. I saw this transformation in Rwanda, where over 1,000 Rwandans who themselves were bereaved and wounded, they in turn, as we trained them and sent them out, in this ripple effect model, that's what we call Oasis Africa, a ripple effect model, they began to become oaks of righteousness, bringing healing to others. That's why I do it, because I don't believe that what I have in my hands, because the challenge is always, Gladys, what do you have in your hands? Many times in the face of trauma in Africa, I have felt empty-handed. I have felt weak. It isn't just Africa, but I remember 2001, just before 9/11, was a Gujarati earthquake in India. And I was at Fuller, my spring break at Fuller. So someone emailed me from India, and they said, we hear you do amazing trauma work in Africa. Can you come to India and help us? I wanted my spring break, and I felt I didn't have anything. But the Lord seemed to ask me, Gladys, what do you have in your hands? You're not just a student, you are my child. And so I prepared a team and we went to India to train trauma workers with the Gujarati earthquake. So basically, it's what I have in my hands. I have hope in Christ Jesus. I have the skills He's given me, and He uses me to create these oaks of righteousness so that a wave of healing can flow through my people, through my continent. And what I call the broken, the dismembered Africa can now be remembered, reborn, renewed, and then they also bring renewal. That's why I do what I do.
It's a tremendous vision of hope in the midst of, again, some very difficult times and places.
Yes.
Now, how did you get started in this journey of being a part of trauma healing and psychology? What is it that how has the Lord led you into this in your life, in your own experience?
Yeah, I've often reflected on that. You know, how did I come to be? And I think my eyes got opened, I think in year 2000 when my mother died. My mother died while I was at Fuller, and I had to go back home for the funeral. And when we sat back in the village, as scores of people came and sat down every evening, they would tell stories about my mother. And suddenly I realized that my mother, an illiterate, godly woman who knew the Bible through and through, she would tell me, read for me John 3:16. If you start at verse 10, she said, no, go a bit lower. You know, she really knew the Bible. But I realized my mother was a counselor, because people would talk of how many marriages my mother had and brought healing to, that she would even be sick on her bed and she hears a couple is not working together and she says, call them. She tells the husband, I'm hearing this and that, right from her sick bed. So it's like I grew up watching my mother reach out to the broken. And that became my lifestyle. So that all the way from high school, that was the first time the Lord led me to the north part of Kenya during the Shifta War, when the Boran tribe was caught between the Somali guerrillas who came to fight in Kenya, wanting a portion of the land for themselves, and then between the government of Kenya. So it's that the Somali men would be hit by the Kenyan army for hiding, the Boran men for hiding Somalis. Then Somali would hit at them for betraying the cause that Somalia felt they had. So anyway, it was a traumatic time and lots of kids were orphaned. Hyenas would walk around picking bodies of broken kids. And so when our bishop told us about the story of the suffering of the North, he said, bring clothes, bring money. And it sent me as a leader of the Christian Union to go among the student body and gather all this stuff and bring it. But then I looked at myself. I had 3 sets of clothes: my school uniform, the Sunday wear, and what I wore in the garden. And then money wise, I had 5 shillings, which is like a tenth or less, or 20th of a dollar. So anyway, I didn't have anything to give. So I went to this bishop and I said, instead of trying to look for something for me to give, I want to give myself. So he knew me. He had just laid the year before, he had laid his hands on me and commissioned me as a lay preacher in the Methodist Church when I was 17. So at 18 years, he made plans for me to go among the Boran. And I founded the first church among the broken, the bleeding, the crying children. We fed babies. We picked up the sick and dying. And I realized this was the first introduction to the world of brokenness in Africa and trauma for me. And it sort of like became my lifestyle, that I would reach out to the hurting. And I continued all through school as I taught high school, as physics and chemistry, to the extent that so many kids were coming to me all the time. My little office became a counseling room. And it was at that point when I ran out of tools to help them. Whatever I had as a lay counselor was used up. And I went back to university to study psychology. Got my master's, started Oasis Africa, and the rest is history. Because with my master's, I did Rwanda, I did Nairobi bombing. Again, drawn into the deep end, because when the United Nations evacuated their staff from Kigali, like you've watched in Hotel Rwanda, they came to Nairobi and they called me. Actually, they came to my office and said, we need you downtown. They had put all their staff into the hotel, every available hotel space in Nairobi. And I walked into 680 Hotel, and there were bags and crying babies everywhere. And the United Nations person who had called me told me, we want you to debrief these people. There is a fax, that was the days of the fax, a fax here from New York saying that all of them have to be debriefed before they're deployed anywhere. So there's a little room down the hall. It's a bedroom turned into an office. You can go there and start now. So it's like, that's how I got into it. And so many years down the line, when I went to Fuller, I had so much practical experience behind me. My desire to go to Fuller was okay. I ran out of tools as a counseling psychologist with a graduate degree. And then where does my faith feature in my psychology? And I knew Fuller would give me an answer. So I went to get my PhD to get more skills, and then I went right back after my PhD. The rest is history.
Well, it's been a tremendous history as we see the Lord use Oasis in so many ways and use you in the development of others and developing standards of counseling.
Mm-hmm.
Could you maybe share one or two stories as you think of Oasis over the last few years that really highlight sort of what you see as what gives you hope in the work that you do?
Yeah, there are many stories, but let me just pick one. One has been my desire for licensing of psychologists in Kenya. And by the way, when I say licensing of psychologists, people think, oh, secular. Okay. The other day, after Garissa Al-Shabaab terror attack, I sat with like 200 psychologists at Chiromo Mortuary compound, debriefing them after a long day's work. When they would come, they would take families who are trying to identify the bodies of their children, and some of the bodies were so destroyed that to identify them was very difficult. So they would have to go in several times with the parents to identify these bodies. Point is, in the evening, some of them were broken. I mean, some of the counselors were really in trouble. Some of the psychologists were in trouble. So we had to sit with them and debrief them and remind them of self-care. How do you take care of yourself as you take care of others? And I did ask them that day, I said, how many of you are committed Christians? 80% of the hands were in the air. So most of the psychologists in Kenya who have followed me into training, I say followed me because there are so many who have gone back to do their graduate degrees in psychology because of my being in the field. Most of them are committed Christians. So anyway, my prayer has been along the way to get accreditation for training programs, to get licensing for these people. Now, we do not have a board of psychology in Kenya. So how are we to get a board of psychology that was blessed by the government to offer this licensing and accreditation for training programs? So it has been a long journey. Getting the bill for psychology written, getting it tabled into parliament, pushing it for it to become accepted as the law of Kenya to set up a board of psychology, and then the president signing it and gazetting it for action. It's all done. Finally, by last year, after many, many years, the president signed the bill into law. And right now, we are working with the Ministry of Health in setting up a board of psychology. For me, this is going to take us a long ways because we have had people masquerading as counselors, even guys presenting on radio, counselors and this sort of thing. So I feel for me, it's a long journey. And it's not only licensing and accreditation, it's the number of universities that have started offering psychology, including Africa International University, AIU, which used to be Negus. I helped them write the curriculum. I've advised many of the universities in writing curricula or in changing it to become more culturally oriented, more value-based, and so on and so forth. So those are some of the big wins that I do believe the Lord has helped us to do. And Oasis Africa continues to lead in terms of mentoring and growing psychologists. Right now, as we talk, I know that ScholarLeader International is actually financing one of them or giving her a scholarship to do her PhD. My immediate helper at Oasis Africa, Naomi, is doing a PhD at Desa University. But besides Naomi, there's another intern who's been with us who is also doing her PhD. And then this year, 4 more of my associates started their PhDs in clinical psychology. So all these are people I've mentored over the years, have grown their skills, and all of them are committed Christians. And this gives me so much joy that I can look back and say, I'm leaving behind a trail that others can follow in the days ahead.
Timeless pioneering work.
ask, could you just
Yeah, yeah,
could
keep
you
going.
comment
Yes.
on the? I was struck by the deliberate methodology that you've developed for the tragedy in Garissa
Yes.
and for follow-up.
Yes.
Could you comment on why that's important?
Okay. Crisis brings, or critical incidents bring chaos, absolute chaos. So it's like, just imagine like lightning hitting a chicken, a white chicken. What you have is feathers everywhere. That's the chaos I'm talking about. Now, we know trauma loves chaos. Traumatic stress actually breaks resiliency and it creates chaos. And so my biggest challenge all the time in responding to this crisis has been how do you bring order? How do you bring professionalism? Because everybody becomes a professional when there is chaos. Guys walking there to do whatever and they don't know what to do. So we keep telling counselors and psychologists that even a butcher can masquerade as a surgeon because he can open the tummy using a sharp knife. But then who can bring it together? Only the surgeon. So anyway, that calls for order and for professionalism. So we have over the years perfected a plan. And actually the time it really came to bear was Westgate terror attack. We were able to put together a plan. No, I think, let me backtrack a little bit. 1998 USA bombing. We started then. I put together a large coalition of counseling organizations, like 13 of them, and we had a team of like 300 psychologists and counselors manning the Nairobi bombing. And actually, how we brought them together very quickly is that my husband asked me, "What are you doing about Nairobi bombing?" I said, "Please, I'm preparing to go to Fula. Leave me alone." He says, "If you don't do something about Nairobi bombing, how will you explain it to the whole world that you did Rwanda and here at home at your doorstep you're doing nothing?" So anyway, I went to the press and I said, "Tomorrow morning, if you have gotten any training from us, because we've been training these level 1 lay counselors for many years, if you got any training from us, could you please, 9 o'clock, come to All Saints Cathedral and you help us Nairobi bombing?" I think that was Friday, and I asked for Monday. Monday morning at 9 o'clock, the press came, all of the cameras came, Gladys is doing something about the bombing. I had asked the General Secretary of National Council of Churches to come and open the training for us. So the media were asking me, "How many are you expecting? 10? 15 helpers?" I said, "I don't know." By 9 o'clock that morning, there were 300 people who had come by train, they had come by night bus, they had come from all over the country, and there are people we had been training with this ripple effect model. That's what saved Nairobi. So we started planning then. Strategically, what do you do? How do you manage it? And so everyone had to go through training. My book, which you used in Rwanda, is what you use for Nairobi. And we trained these people. So it's like we strategize. This is what you do. You get supervision here. This is how you see the people. This is how you process them. I do assessment. And we repeated exactly the same thing for Westgate. And I remember with the Nairobi bombing, US Embassy flew in the gentleman, a doctor who managed Oklahoma bombing here. And they brought him like 2 weeks after the bombing to come and manage trauma in Nairobi. So they walked into All Saints Cathedral Hall, one of the places we are using for the group debriefing. And there were like 20 groups buzzing away. And I sat them right in the middle, 10 people from US Embassy and USID. And they asked me, "Tell us what you're doing." And I explained to them the plan. This doctor said, "Gladys, you are more organized in Nairobi 2 weeks after the bombing than we were in Oklahoma 6 weeks after the bombing." So anyway, we perfected that plan at Westgate, and it's exactly the same one we've repeated for Garissa. And I'm so glad that by this time, our government really admires the work we are doing as psychologists, and the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Health have blessed us. Carry on, you report to us, you have our every support to manage the Garissa University College situation. So basically we have a plan, And we can see ourselves now that we can even share this with others. I got a call the other day from a psychologist in Nigeria. They are saying, can you come and help us with the Boko Haram disaster? We need to know what to do. So we are at a point where we'll be sharing this around Africa because we know we have the resources in our hands. And if we plan right with Christ among us, healing can come to our continent through many disasters, some of them past, others present, and who knows what is to come.